Hello, everyone, and welcome to our intercultural presentation on strategies for a volatile environment in present. Specifically, we chose Ford because the automotive industry is now the center of North America's political and economic friction, and Ford is one of the most exposed players. Under the USMCA, tariffs and labor requirements are no longer abstract. They directly affect Ford's cost structure and ability to move vehicles freely across the region. The $16 per hour labor value content rule, meant to raise wages and standardize working conditions, has forced Ford to redesign part of its wage and sourcing strategy, especially in Mexico, where production remains essential for cost efficiency. At the same time, the rapid response labor mechanisms has increased scrutiny on workplace rights, creating both compliance costs and opportunities for improvement. Add to this the renewed trade rhetoric in the US and upcoming elections across the region, and Ford faces real uncertainty about future tariffs, labor expectations, and regional integration. In short, Ford must operate in an environment where political shifts can instantly affect its cost, logistics, and brand reputation. The challenge is not only economic, it's structural. How to maintain competitiveness while meeting in the new social and regulatory standards set by the USMCA.
Our first recommendation is that we propose to mitigate the primary risks of political instability as well as tariff related costs. This starts with diversifying investment in production. Many automakers are delaying long-term investments in diversifying their investments until the new review of the USMCA takes place in 2026. The 6-year joint review in July 2026 and the 16-year expiration date set for 2036 create high levels of uncertainty for long-term investment. We recommend waiting on long-term investment until after 2026, after the joint review. And instead, focus on flexibility of short-term production adjustments and focus on agile capital development. Another recommendation is that we recommend avoiding tariffs for Ford. This means being compliant with the USMCA's stricter rules of origin, or the ROO. This means that most uh, this means that most of the production must come from Northern American countries to avoid a 25% tax on exported goods. And lastly, for the our last recommendation for mitigating risks is to ensure a for flexible risk fund. This would be a pre-approved government co-funding or subsidy in Canada to cope with price changes and absorb temporary uh, tariff related costs and provide a bridge financing for short-term layoffs. Rather than shifting the burden rather than shifting the burden of price hikes entirely on the public sector or employees by layoffs, this will ultimately uphold their reputation and not drive away their loyal customers and employees. Nextly, I will briefly touch on the secure supply chain recommendation. Now, our second recommendation where the goal is to maintain stable and resilient supply chains in the face of uncertainty with the USMCA. This can involve nearshoring, which will be compliant with the rules of origin, as I mentioned earlier with the ROO, and require demands on higher percentage of content to originate in North America. Focusing company com- focusing for Ford to be compliant with their supply chains. The USMCA requires manufacturers to source more than 70% of their steel and aluminum from North American countries. and in doing so will help reduce costs. And
In our previous analysis, we saw that the USMCA's new labor provisions, like the labor value content rule and the rapid response labor mechanism, have started to raise standards, especially in Mexico. However, they also created some new challenges. While US and Canadian auto workers have benefited from recent union contracts and wage gains, political uncertainty and tariff tensions have made companies more cautious, leading to shorter contracts and fewer long term employment guarantees. So, for our third recommendation, we focus on Ford's workforce, which is central to its success across the US, Mexico, and Canada. We propose the launch of a new initiative called the One Ford Workforce Wellbeing Program, where the goal is to unify employee standards and support systems across all three countries. This program would ensure fair wages and safe working conditions. It would promote cross border collaboration through exchange programs between plants in different countries. And by investing in people, Ford not only improves productivity and retention, but also strengthens its reputation as a socially responsible employer, which is a key competitive advantage in today's market.
For Ford, SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, is essential to staying competitive under the USMCA. Labor rules now link fair pay and safety directly to trade access, by raising wages, improving skills, and ensuring safe conditions across its North American plants. Ford built stability and productivity. Beyond SDG 8, Ford also advances SDG 9 through regional electric vehicles innovation, SDG 12 with responsible sourcing, SDG 13 through carbon neutrality goals, and SDG 17 by collaborating with unions and suppliers. Together, these goals make sustainability and a driver of Ford's long-term success in America.
I will give you an overview over the intercultural communication. So, regarding Hofstede's cultural dimensions, first I chose power distance, where Mexico scores at 81. So, basically, Mexican culture scores quite high, meaning that the leaders show authority and a lot of clarity and confidence in the decision making context. So, for example, when leaders are being addressed, there should be very like formally and respectfully addressed, and also the structure is more of a top-down structure in showing solutions to their staff. Secondly, in collectivism, Mexico scores a 30, so it's definitely more collectivist than individualist country. This means group harmony is very important, loyalty is very important, and trust, which is way more important in general than individual achievements. So the workers strongly identify with their whole team and not just prioritize like individual successes. So in implications for addressing leaders would be important to again strengthen the community and also the job security, and also frame proposals in a we language and not like a specific point out like specific people, but just more the collective, and also give appreciation to the group efforts. And then for the communication context, Mexico is a high context culture where the professionals value relationship building and indirect communication and not as so much the confrontational communication, and also not like direct words so that they can be interpreted as more confrontational. So again, implications for addressing leaders would be acknowledging shared achievements and also use like written follow-up summaries so that you don't appear confrontational in the meetings.